Good morning, Ralph. You asked me the other day, as we were sitting in a beer garden, screaming at each other about politics. And I think, I think people around us kind of get upset about these loud political discussions. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of them kind of get up and go to another table. But okay, but you asked how I'd become such a screaming, raving, hard right. And just for the record, I've just become a little bit right of center. I'm not full MAGA. I'm just a little bit right of center. I used to be a little bit left of center. That's all. None of my positions have actually changed. I've just kind of come to question the left position, the Democrats today. And I thought about it, and I want to tell you why. We think we're talking about politics because we say the words Trump and migration or whatever. But we're not talking about politics. We're plugged into some kind of international hysteria. And it's being driven by the press, and I think behind the press, mostly leftist agitators or leftist strategists. I'll tell you why I think that. Take immigration. Immigration up to now, up to Trump, immigration was always an issue, and it was always a thing that they would fight about in Congress. And I'm talking about America now. But they would fight about it in Congress. In other words, they would propose a law that would propose to solve the problem. And the leftists would say, well, that's not good enough. And the rightists would say, oh, it's too much. And so they would argue and try to find some kind of compromise that they could all vote on paper, as law, which can be reinforced by institutions. And that's actually what politics is. And that's what politics used to be. The immigration that we now have is enforced, is based on law that was passed, in years past. It's normal law. It's in writing. It's a political thing. It's statecraft. It's the rule of law. And by the way, the biggest part of the immigration law that we have now is the Immigration Act of 1965, which was passed by an all Democrat Congress and ratified by LBJ, a Democrat president. That was in 1965. So a Democrat. The immigration laws we have now are Democrat immigration laws. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that politics is about fighting with each other, finding some kind of consensus or compromise, putting that into law, and then enforcing the law. That's what actual politics is. But no one now is trying to, I don't see anyone suggesting a law, proposing a law. The Democrats constantly say no one is illegal. No one is illegal on stolen land, famously. It's racist to deport illegal aliens. And they won't say the word illegal. They'll say undocumented, as if it's not against the law, which it is. It's on the books. It's written. But no one is trying to put that into a law. No one is proposing, you know what? You Republicans say, you don't want immigration. We Democrats want immigration. Why don't we, illegal immigration, unfettered immigration. We can make a compromise. We'll say, once a week, every other Sunday, we'll open all the borders for half a day, for the whole day. For half a day, for 2 hours. Hey, give us 2 hours, and we'll open the borders, and then we'll get what we want, and we'll close them again for another 2 weeks, and you get what you want. It's a compromise, right? But no one is saying that. No one is saying we have to change the law. This law, it's wrong. We have to make the law better. No one's going to laws. They're going straight to you're a racist if you don't think that unvetted immigration is a good idea. Here in German television, they had a program, a thing about, in the news, they reported on a big anti-immigration demonstration in England. And The wording was there was a hard right, I don't know what they said, Rex Extrema, I think extreme right demonstration in England. They didn't say these are just normal people who think we're going too far with this immigration thing. They said it's an extreme right. It's become the norm to give a moral label to anyone who has a political opinion, which used to be normal, which used to be okay, it's just a political opinion. This is a political opinion that we cannot have illegal immigrants that Obama had. He was always throwing out illegal immigrants. So was Clinton. Recently, there was a thing in Davos, the last thing in Davos, both Obama and Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton was in Davos. Obama was in a podcast in America. I don't know. They both said, oh no, I'm actually against illegal immigration. I think illegal immigration is wrong. We have to close the borders. We have to stop people who are coming illegally who have no right to be here. That's actually a reasonable, normal political standpoint. It's not a Nazi standpoint. It's not a fascist and not a racist standpoint. But in the press and kind of in our conversations, just in normal with my friends, it's now racist. And that's not a political change. It's not political. It's moral, and it's arbitrary because the morality changes anytime, any opportunity. And I know from being raised in a church in a kind of a very strict church, which was fine in some ways, but it was also very manipulative, and they manipulated you for morals. They told you if you're doing something morally wrong, and they defined what was morally wrong, and they could manipulate you emotionally, and that's what they're doing. And it's not new. It started earlier. I didn't see it, but looking back, it was there. It started, with Reagan and with any Republican president. You could feel it with Reagan. You could see it with Bush. With Bush under Bush Jr. It was things like he's going to take away our civil rights. And so if you support Bush in any way, you were anti-democratic. You were supporting taking away civil rights. And of course, none of that happened. It was the Patriot. They were complaining about the Patriot Act and many other things. And of course, he was a racist, of course. And he was a fascist here in Germany. I heard, a lot of people who were professional journalists in the public sphere would say, I don't think they ever wrote it. Maybe they did, but they would tell me, drinking in a beer, they say, I wouldn't be surprised if George Bush, called out military law, military rule, and shut down democracy. I expect it any moment. It'll happen any moment. And they were serious about it. And so this idea of that Republican presidents are somehow evil and anti-democratic, this happens again and again and again, and it trickles down to Germany, and people get upset, and then they yell at me at it because they think I have something to do with it, or they just need someone to get out to vomit their emotions on. And I'm thinking, where is this coming from? And I try to follow it back, and see, because I'm here in Germany and not in America, it's easy for me to follow it back because all my friends, who are really upset about America think, this is America is now no longer democracy. It's a fascist state. They'll say that. My friends will say it's a fascist state. Trump is a fascist, and America's now a fascist state. They don't go to America. They don't know anything about America. They haven't been to America for years. I've had people, 4 people, relative and close friends, since Trump came to power have blocked me and no longer have contact, have gone no contact, like the Democrats call it, because they perceive me as as a Trump supporter. Because I've said publicly, Trump is just a conservative Republican president like any other. He's not a fascist. He's not a racist. And if he is a little bit of racist, that obviously does not affect his political his political policies. He's doing some good things. Maybe he's doing some bad things. He's a normal president. That's basically what I've said. I have supported him a little more because I do like some of the things he's doing. I think some of the things he's doing is necessary, and I think some of the presidents that I've liked in the past, like Obama, I'm still a big fan of Obama. I think he made some mistakes. Okay, so that's normal, and that is seen more and more as something evil. And while under Bush, when I would say Bush is not stopping, the Patriot Act does not cancel civil rights. Bush is not a fascist destroying democracy. This is what I would say. It's just, the Patriot Act is a temporary act. It's only being used in extreme cases to fight terrorism. I think it's legitimate. 9/11 just happened, folks. It's a big thing. It's legitimate. But everyone would look at me in horror and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you said that." It's a normal thing to say. And they didn't block me back then. The blocking, the going no contact, the shunning. In religious terms, we call it shunning. It's what Jehovah's Witnesses do when you leave the Jehovah's Witness church. It's shunning. They didn't shun me back under Bush, but they would like ask Astrid, how can you, what's wrong with him? How can you live with him? And she once cried and said, "Eric, I have to defend you to my friends. What are you doing?" And so they would look at me, and I'm the only one there who is a journalist who really takes all this stuff seriously and really looks into it. And I'm the only American there, and I say, George Bush he's a conservative president, but and I didn't vote for him, by the way. I don't really like him. I did not vote for him, but he's not. He's not Hitler 2. That's not happening. And they would get really upset about it. It would be this worst thing they've ever heard in their lives. It was like I was saying, yes, I eat small children. Yes, but that's on the level that it was. And they would attack Astrid, or kind of saying, Astrid, how they would make it into a moral thing. Astrid, how can you live with him? He's such, and so they didn't shun me, but now it's taken one step further with Trump, and it's getting worse. And when it was bad with Reagan, it was bad under Bush, worse under Bush. Now it's worse under Trump, and they're actually shunning me. And these are 2 of the 4 people who shunned me, went no contact. They're Germans. They've never been. I don't think they've ever been to America. One has not. The other one, if she's ever been to America, it's been decades. And they both wrote, "I'm ashamed of you." And that would imply that their friends were telling them, "How can you be friends with this guy?" And I see them, once a month. One of them I see only, she lives in another city. I see maybe once a year. How can you? And so they got attacked for being associated with me, because I would say publicly, Trump is just a normal politician. Everyone's getting upset for no reason. And they would attack them. And then they went on and said, "I'm ashamed of you. I am ashamed." And they went no contact, and they shunned me, shut off friendship and family relationships because of this pressure from outside. And then I ask myself, where is this coming from? In Germany, these guys have no contact with America. They don't do what America. They're not in America, being shot at by ICE people, being thrown in dark cellars, being tormented for being trans, being put in concentration camps, and having numbers, tattooed on their wrists because they're, I don't know, LGBT or something like that. They're not being persecuted by Trump. They're here. Their politics are here, and the politics of their current conservative government is pretty close to the politics of Trump, by the way. And this is clearly not a fascist state, and so they where do they get their information from that America is a fascist state, and anyone who denies it, anyone who says, "Hey, it's not a fascist state," is evil? Where do they get that information from? They don't get it firsthand. They get it by the press. It's the press that is telling them. And you look at the German press, and they're very sneaky. They often don't say it's a fascist country, but they say zunehmend into it, more and more, and this and that, and the impression is that evil is happening there. And of course, Germans like to get upset about things, so they go with it, full on, and they react as if it's their problem, as if when I say Trump is not as bad as you say he is, it's a personal insult to them and a threaten of their personal win life, although of course it doesn't affect them at all. And so it's the press that is doing this. In Germany, it's the German press, and I look at where these German press comes from, and they, at the end of the article, there's always, according to the New York Times, according to CNN, according to this, so they always quote their sources, which is leftist American press reports, and so they are affected by, and usually, very often, they just write almost word for word the American leftist, article or whatever podcast or whatever, and they just repeat it. And so then you look at American press and you say, yeah, the Americans, this is it. They're more and more the leftist American press. It doesn't come from the right. The leftist American press is portraying this as the apocalypse, and portraying it as a moral thing. They never question when someone says, is Trump a racist for closing the border? That has nothing to do with racism. It means, if you're white, you have to show your passport just like you do if you're a non-white. It's the same thing for everyone. But they'll say, yes, that's clearly racist. And the press will repeat it, and therefore it becomes true. And more, the political discussion has nothing to do with actual politics. It's about racism, perceived racism, fascism. It's driven by the press, and in America, it's driven by the press that is beholden to a party, either Democrat Party or the Republican Party. They're on a side, and they're fighting the good fight for politics, and they're driving people away from actual political thought into a moral panic, into a moral kind of emotional, gushing, momentary emotional high that is very manipulatable and that has nothing to do with actual politics. And it started looking back. It started with Reagan, got worse with Bush, and now it's really bad with Trump. And I think this is how you teach a nation not to think politically, and not to be able to think politically, and not to be able to judge your politicians based on policies that they make and laws that they pass, which is what politicians actually do. And instead make everyone dependent on some kind of moral authority out there who is going to tell us what to get upset about today. And that's why I've turned against the leftist press, the leftist ideology, and I think it's destroying, and maybe even partly intentionally, on the extreme fringe, it's destroying the political discourse in the Western world. Okay, that's the long explanation for the short question. You can yell at me if you want next time we have a beer together in the beer garden.